Welcome to the Jyotish Project. My name is Sajjan Sharma, and this is lecture 19 of the Rahu Ketu files that is on Rahu Venus conjunction. So I think it's time that we finally discuss a very important conjunction that a lot of people have a lot of ideas about. So here's my idea of it. Let's get into it. So the objective is consider this: Aishwarya Rai, Taylor Swift, Sigmund Freud, Al Gore all share the same conjunction. Rahu with Shukra. Some embodied beauty in art, others explored desire, fulfillment, the ethics of harmony on a global scale. What unites them is not their field, but the experience of the field. The magnified play of brightness of Shukra, attraction, satiation, all the things that Venus represents that we're going to discuss in this lecture also. So not only that you understand the conjunction, but you through each and every lecture, the effort is to also teach about Rahu itself and the Graha itself. So we'll also learn what Shukra, what Venus is within the psychostructure that we study through Jyotish. What does Venus represent? What capacity it is? So this lecture explores Rahu Shukra conjunction as the psycho-metaphysical trial of fulfillment, satiation, devotion, all of these kinds of things. The testing of our capacity to assimilate experience without being consumed by it. Shukra governs refinement, proportion, and the rhythm of enjoyment. Rahu disrupts that rhythm, exaggerating the pursuit of brightness until satiation turns into addiction, agitation. We will trace how this, so almost like a compulsion. Venus goes into a compulsive behavior here with Rahu. We will trace how this conjunction manifests as brilliance, exhaustion, and finally balance, where the brightness of Shukra ceases to blind, and begin to illuminate, revealing the deepest Venusian lesson: to receive fully, to rest completely, recuperate, regenerate, all Venus things, and find beauty in enough. So the eight sections that we're going to do in this lecture are Venus, Shukra, and the psychostructure, Rahu's amplification of Shukra. It's the amplifying effect. We're going through that sort of progression in our lectures. Amplification, distortion, Dhumrakar, as we'd studied in one of the lectures, uh, creating a smoke-like sort of distortion for the Graha. Psychological manifestations of the conjunction, the process of growth, chart conditions that modify the conjunction. Rahu Shukra is a trial of fulfillment and satiation. Essential patterns of Rahu Shukra and lives under Rahu Shukra conjunction. Just have a list of all the famous sort of people that have this conjunction. So you can scan this QR code, fill out the details if you're interested in getting a private access to the Rahu Ketu vault, the secret library of Rahu and Ketu. Here, I will be sharing all of my research and studies over time. So I'll keep building this vault. It's completely free. And I just need you to put in your real full name and real last name and your email address. If you send some fake name, some kind of thing, if your email doesn't seem legit, you're not going to get access to this private vault. That's my only condition. I want to connect with real people who want to connect openly, not hide behind this way of the internet that we have these days. So if you do that, I'll send you an email with the password, and then you can have access to all the resources for free. So Venus in the psychostructure, after sovereignty, Sun, attunement, Moon, resolution, Mars, articulation, Mercury, and discernment, Jupiter. The next organizing strand of the psyche is valuation and fulfillment, which is Venus. This is Shukra, the bright one. That's what Shukra means. The pure one, from the root Such. The Graha that governs satiation, Tripti, devotion, bhakti, and the evaluation of worth, auchitya. Super important. Venus is one of the most important grahas to have a satisfying experience so that you don't feel tormented in your senses. Your relationship to your five senses, the rest of the grahas is healthy. You know how much to get from these, and how much to give back so you can maintain them. You don't pluck too many flowers off the flower pot. You don't overfish. Venus has to understand that it cannot overfish. That could destroy the ecology of things. So there's a certain psycho-ecology that we have, and Venus allows us to have that kind of understanding of how to continually have a satisfying experience in life, not overdo things. So, where Jupiter seeks the good and the meaningful, Venus seeks the valuable and pleasurable. And pleasure is not a bad thing, pleasure in the sense of things that make us feel fulfilled, satisfied. It gives a sense of comfort. Sitting on the floor as opposed to sitting on a mattress. There's a comfort that comes with mattress. There's a comfort that a good car, which is Venus, with good shock absorbers, gives you a certain sort of stability. Good ligaments, which is Venus, gives you sort of a strength that even if you have strong muscles but weak ligaments, you cannot use those strong muscles. It's the fulcrum point that of Venus that makes things, gives you leverage in life. So Venus is very important that way. So if Jupiter expands our moral and philosophical horizon, Shukra teaches us how to experience the expansion harmoniously. Harmony is a very common word we hear in when we see Venus, diplomacy, harmony. But we need to open that up. What does that even mean, right? So it harmony comes from the balance of uh, taking and giving in a way that is fair. So Venus has a lot to do with fairness. That's where balance comes from. It requires discernment, a Venusian discernment of sorts. How to find rhythm, proportion, and the refinement within the field of exchange of what? Of energy, of time, of attention. So in the psychostructure, Venus governs the law of replenishment, regenerative capacity. What is taken must be renewed. What is given must be received. Shukra regulates the flow of virya, the vital potency that sustains creative and relational life. When this flow is obstructed or abused, misused, the psyche feels depleted. When it moves freely, one experiences satisfaction, grace, and beauty. Shukra is therefore the principle that converts experience into contentment, santosha. So it gives that one of the yama niyamas in yoga is santosh, contentment, being at ease, at peace. Venus gives us that. When it's enough, knowing when it's enough. Are you going to eat the entire cake? You're going to take a slice, enjoy that slice, and not eat a slice for a week or so or two, and relax, as opposed to having a distorted relationship with that cake. Overeat. It asks, is it worth it? Does it restore what it consumes? It governs, am I willing to pay the price for this thing to get this experience? There's a price involved with everything. That's Venus. It governs the evaluation of relationships, pleasures, possessions, the subtle balance between giving and keeping, and the capacity for devotion, the ability to lose oneself in what is loved, what we are attached to, which is what we call love mostly, as a conditional love, without collapsing into dependence. After Jupiter, Shukra arises naturally. For one's wisdom, jnana, establishes direction. Jupiter gives us that jnana based direction. Fulfillment, ananda, must follow. Understand the psychometaphysics of this progression also as we moving through the lectures. The lectures are not just about Rahu and Ketu. You'll see a progression of where we're also understanding the grahas and we are understanding many other ideas and concepts through and through. So I'm just not talking of them directly in the sense of how I just mentioned how what we are progressing is what I'm believing that you'll catch on to these things as you'll probably be taking notes ideally. Knowledge alone cannot complete the human circuit. It must be embodied as connection, service for others, love, art, refinement, relationship, which is to be shared, which is Shukra, to bring it to others in a pleasant, graceful manner. Shukra refines the fire of Mars, the intelligence of Mercury, the ideals of Jupiter into a lived sense of harmony. It also gives a lot of embalmment of this sort of it nurses the wounds of Saturn also. So that's a Venus really helps Saturn in finding relief from the burdens of life. Having a hard, tough day and eating a satiating meal, which is a very Venus. Venus is a sense of taste, of rasa. It is the tattva mahabhuta, panch mahabhuta, or just panchmaham. Venus is uh, apas, water element. It gives a sense of taste. So we say, right, when someone has a strong, beautiful music, you have a good sense of taste, right? That sense of taste comes from this Venusian sort of bhuta. So the ability to enjoy without excess, to connect without losing oneself, and to sustain what one values. How to sustain, how to not overfish, pluck too many flowers off the flower pot. So it's very important to understand Venus as that capacity in the psychostructure. So when Venus functions clearly, self worth, devotion, and grace move together. Each act nourishes rather than drains. When distorted, valuation falters. We misvalue, overvalue things, get taken advantage of, uh, or sell ourselves short in different ways. The psyche seeks brightness and indulgence. It overindulges, gets addicted. The moon gets habituated because of that addiction of Venus Rahu, and now it seeks that dopamine constantly, substitutes devotion with attachment, measures worth through others' eyes, not having a deeper sense of self worth that comes through actually having skills and confidence in one's capacity to serve others in different ways. Thus, Shukra represents the trial of fulfillment, whether our desires culminate in reciprocity or addiction, whether pleasure remains luminous, bright, shush, pure, or becomes a shadow of longing, of compulsion. So, what does Rahu do to this Shukra now? So, when Rahu joins Shukra, the logic of exaggeration enters the domain of fulfillment itself. You see, Shukra's natural rhythm is one of proportion, taking just enough, knowing when to stop, taking what replenishes, giving what sustains. Rahu disturbs this rhythm by magnifying desire, gives one seeks glamour, attention until they lose their reflective balance. So, what should be appreciation becomes a craving, a deep need. Otherwise, Venus doesn't feel as if it has enough. It's not feeling uh, grounded in its Venusian capacity. What should be devotion becomes fixation. Shukra, by nature, refines things, gives it grace and gentleness. It delights in symmetry, reciprocity, and neutral nourishment. Rahu magnifies these refinements into compulsion. Symmetry and proportion is a lot to do with Mercury, actually. There's a sutra dedicated to that. It says well formed and stuff, the sutra calls. So Venus is not so much about symmetry and stuff. It has a lot to do with that's why Mercury and Venus are really good friends with each other, love each other. But it's all about mutual nourishment and reciprocity. So Rahu magnifies these refinements into compulsions. The person begins to chase beauty rather to experience it, to seek validation rather than intimacy, to collect pleasures faster than they can be digested. So Rahu often gives us this thing of getting a lot of experience before we have developed the capacity to digest it. So the law of and in that way, Rahu can traumatize a person. So the law of replenishment becomes inverted. Enjoyment consumes more than it restores. So this conjunction therefore manifests as the intoxication of desire. Not only sensual or romantic, which it can do, but aesthetic, social, and emotional also. Depending on what are the connections with Moon and the rest of the chart also. For example, if you have Rahu Venus in Cancer sign, it will add to that emotional tone to it. The feeling tone becomes important and gets distorted with this Rahu Venus. So the person might go through a series of relationship completely emotionally dissatisfied still. It's a conjunction I think that Tom Cruise has. Rahu, Venus, and Cancer. So the individual becomes magnetized by Venusian symbols: art, love, money, luxury, approval, harmony. Rahu's dhumra, smoke makes them shimmer brighter. It gives a shiny object syndrome, promising ultimate fulfillment, yet the satisfaction never endures, never sustains. The person really sort of s- like, you might love chocolate cake, you overeat chocolate cake, and you're like, I hate chocolate cakes. So you're not able to endure, sustain that connection for longer because you overdid that thing, got into it for the wrong reasons, got hypnotized by it in some sense. So it can have a hypnotic sense of attraction to things, and it's not based on a real evaluation of what one needs. So pleasure turns to pursuit to exhaustion. Psychologically, Rahu Shukra amplifies a yearning for recognition of worth. So one is trying to actually figure out one's value, one is trying to evaluate one's sense of self worth by using others as a yardstick. Oh, because I could get that expensive cars, that means I am worth this much. Because I could be in a relationship with this kind of person or that kind of person, that means I am like this. So it's not coming from knowing what it is fundamentally, and maybe just one car should be enough and be like, okay, that was good. Now I have this sense of thing. I'm satisfied with it. The person goes on and on and on and on endlessly, confused. It's constantly being sort of, it's elusive. The Venusian experience, the actual pure experience, becomes elusive to the person. One doesn't know how to have a healthy relationship with that Venus. The person often seeks to prove value through being desired, adored, or aesthetically affirmed for whatever karmic reasons one needs to do it. So you have to always come from that grounding and not to sort of demonize anyone for having a certain conjunction. It's the souls going through different kinds of karma. As a one, Jyotish should remain grounded in that for sure. At least I try. Relationships become mirrors for self esteem. Beauty becomes a strategy for belonging. You start using beauty to feel like that's what would keep me uh, relevant and stuff, and that's what it becomes a lot about the Venusian experience of things. Beneath refinement lies insecurity, the fear. That's the thing, bhaya, bhayankaraha. There's dhumra and bhaya. The fear that without adornment or approval, without being desired and wanting, and by without being seen as super valuable, like, oh, you're so precious. Venus is these precious things. That's the idea. It's not diamonds. Diamonds are not even that precious anymore. And you'll see it'll crash eventually. So, what happens then? Because we keep saying that diamonds is the gemstone of Venus. It's not. In whichever space time, in whichever time on Earth, Yuga, whatever's considered the most precious becomes Venus. So, Venus is that which is most precious. In an agricultural society, cows are the most precious in ancient times. Whatever feels most precious is the Venus of that thing. That's my take on it. Beneath, and I have a certain logic behind it, and tell me what you think about it. Beneath refinement lies insecurity, the fear that without atonement and approval, one will not be loved at all. One will not be seen as precious enough. So one is trying to force preciousness by making Venusian efforts in life, extended Venusian efforts. So Rahu likes to overextend itself and overdo things in these ways. So yet Rahu's distortion also teaches through disappointment, indulgence in the collapse of imagined ideals, the individual discovers the real nature of Venusian satisfaction, that it arises not from accumulation but from attunement. True Shukra, ple- true Shukra pleasure is rhythmic, not explosive, reciprocal, and not extractive. It it wants the other person to have the best deal. It's thinking about the other, and the other person also has a good Shukra. They're thinking about you. So I keep thinking about how can I make this comfortable for you, and the other person's like, no, 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 no. How can I make this comfortable for you? And that's a perfect ideal Shukra world. It creates a harmony, a trust, and everyone is constantly trying to give comfort to each other. And the rule is broken, and one person tries to hack the system by being extractive. And then the distortion starts. That's the fracture in the system, and then it brings about all kinds of perversions that we see in the world, in business, in art, in different things. So when integrated, Rahu's exaggeration refines taste rather than corrupting it. Eventually it integrates through a lot of illusion experience. The person learns discernment, person learns the madness of the Venus Rahu, and learns to say when something is enough, or what truly nourishes versus what only stimulates. Venus regains its balance. Beauty becomes devotional rather than performative. So you don't want to feel beautiful. There's more aesthetic becomes an internal value. It's not only about looking good, smelling good, and putting on a lot of makeup and stuff, and going to the gym and doing all these kind of external beautification things. It's not about performing. It becomes more of a devotional internal beautification, a deeper sort of octave of the same principle. Enjoyment becomes ritual rather than escape. So enjoyment becomes part of your routine, part of your schedule. It's not like something you do to avoid life. And desire becomes luminous once again, pointing out toward excess but towards elegance, not towards excess but towards elegance, reciprocity, and the quiet radiance of enough. So Venus is a good Venus. If you ever meet a person with a nice, healthy Venus, they know when it's enough. If you're on a dinner table, whoever will have issues with their Venuses, you'll see that it in their eating habits first, in their relationship to food and nourishment first, which is very interesting. And whoever will have a nice Venus, if you have the birth charts for everyone, and you know how to see these things, you'd be like, okay, people with a good Venus are actually having quite a nice time and enjoying their food, as the one person just like trying to get that satiation through the sense of taste and trying to, it's not hitting the spot. So Rahu Venus, it's hard for them for something to hit the spot. I get obsessed with that thing also when it hits it. So psychological manifestations, the Shukra Rahu conjunction expresses itself in the psyche as a drama between desire and discernment. Shukra's role is to measure worth and sustain fulfillment through reciprocity. Rahu's influence magnifies this measurement into obsession, turning Venusian harmony into Venusian hunger. It's like a hungry ghost looking for like things to feed on to satisfy itself. The individual's emotional and relational life begins to oscillate between saturation and emptiness, between the sweetness of connection and the ache of overindulgence. So, some of the things are aesthetic and sensual intensification. The sense becomes magnified. Beauty, taste, touch acquire almost hypnotic power. The one person wants to be in fancy places doing fancy things. One is easily seduced by form, by art, music, pleasure, or physical attraction, but rarely contented by it. The pursuit of refinement turns into addiction to refinement itself. With validation through attraction, self worth becomes externalized about form. The individual measures value by how much they're desired, admired, or appreciated. Relationships are sought for affirmation more than for mutual nourishment. When affection is absent, insecurity surfaces. When present, it is never quite enough. And it's very insidious. Rahu Ketu conjunctions and Rahu Ketu situations in our charts, in conjunctions and different kinds of situations, are very subtle and unconscious. Others around the person might be much more aware than the person itself. With Rahu, it can still be easier for the person to identify, it'll be more out there. With Ketu, it becomes more internal and more hidden. Oscillation of attachment and withdrawal is another one. The psyche swings between intense closeness and the need for distance. So Rahu's exaggeration produces both passion and exhaustion. Desire seeks union, fatigue seeks escape. Relationships may repeat cycles of fascination. So very fascinated. For men, this can be very difficult, especially Rahu Venus. For men, is more difficult. For women, it is more on the sense of what we're discussing here about sensual intensification, validation through attraction, issues with self worth and stuff. But it can give them a very unusual beauty, sort of a very profoundly seductive aura, even. And air about them. By aura, I don't mean an aura, and then you start going into that sort of ideas. No, it's just the air about them. It's sort of this feeling about them. They have this sort of attitude about them. It should feel very desirable for other people. So, because they're fixated and are overdoing their Venus. Desire seeks union, fatigue seeks escape. Relationships may repeat cycles of fascination and disenchantment until discernment matures. Eventually, it matures with age. Venus, especially, matures a lot as a person ages. And Rahu Venus conjunctions can get grounded if the rest of the chart supports and the person is cultivating wisdom and understanding in life. To always assess the whole situation. Material or aesthetic inflation, Venus's love of beauty may expand into extravagance, lavish spending. It depends. Spending, extravagance can depend on the rest of things in the chart. Indulgent living, aesthetic perfectionism. The individual may substitute experiences of depth with displays of taste, mistaking luxury for fulfillment. So, what happens also is that Venus is fundamentally trying to find satisfaction and feeling full. Rahu is not, and wherever it's happening in the chart, depending on whatever situation, it can be related to being a mother, being a parent, of different in different capacities to life. It can be your business relationships. Wherever it's happening, it's not only about aesthetics and beauty and these art and stuff. It brings a sense of dissatisfaction there. And a person overreaches, overdoes that Venus thing to make it fulfilling. And in that process, can sometimes get involved in ways which are not healthy or in ways which are extraordinary also. Rahu gives not just non health, it's not only interpretation, it can also give like an extraordinary way that it sort of plays out. Very different, eccentric, what we call. Sorry. So, yeah, and the devotion distorted into dependency. So, Shukra's bhakti impulse, Venus is a planet of bhakti, of devotion, the urge to surrender lovingly. It's where the libidinal, erotic eros, the libidinal charge sort of gets anchored. That's why it's a quite a powerful force, and one should be use Venus very carefully. Can become submission out of fear. That's possible. The person may overgive, hoping devotion will secure love, or oscillate between pleasing and resenting others. Get involved with the wrong kinds of Venuses. Rahu Venus can get involved with the wrong kinds of Venus situations. The purity of giving is compromised by anxiety of being unworthy. It depends also on the strength and dignity quality of Venus. Venus Rahu, which is a very good quality Venus, will have a very different experience of these conjunctions as opposed to Venus Rahu, which has a very bad, poor, low quality Venus. And Venus can be spoken of in this quality in some sense, like the quality of food we eat, right? If you see someone with a weaker Venus, they eat like drink like a lot of like diet coke and like do random stuff which is not nice for their body, and they don't sort of not conscious of it in some sense. And Rahu Venus will exaggerate that kind of tendencies. A good, exalted, nice, strong Venus in certain positions with Rahu would make it really exceptional, actually. So it depends on the dignities of the grahas, and all these conjunctions get modulated in major ways through this. So the subtle fear beneath the glamour, at the root of Rahu Shukra's intensity lies a quiet terror. What if there's no true satisfaction? So this fear drives the compulsive pursuit of more connection, relationship, pleasure, harmony. It is not greed, but insecurity masquerading as appetite. So if you work on the root, insecurity and fear based on Venus things, which can be done through dialogue and core figuring out the core sort of ideation the psyche is having about these things, then that appetite and the connection, the outward post outward addiction and the pattern can be sort of, it just dissolves because internally something is shifted for the person. So when this conjunction ripens, the same sensitivity that once chased pleasure becomes capable of profound discernment. The individual begins to sense what when sweetness is nourishing, when it is cloying, uh, fulfillment ceases to depend on approval. Beauty is recognized not as something to be possessed, but as something that is perceived, that you start seeing beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. You start serving people and treating people the right way. You start seeing beauty in everything. The good devotional, well functioning Venus doesn't see only some things as beautiful and others as not, starts to practice and learn how everything has a beautiful aspect to it. That's why one of the names of Venus is Kavi, Sanskrit names. It's quite a poet. Venus gives us a capacity to find the poetry and meaning and beauty in everything, and makes existence, which is insufferable and painful, more sufferable, more, you can deal with life better. So then the Venusian psyche returns to its natural brightness. Shukra is a luminous principle of value, starts to evaluate things properly. Love becomes more artful, skillful, mutual. Devotion becomes graceful. Enjoyment returns to its sacred function. To renew life through rhythm, you regenerate better, recuperate better from experiences. You let go of experiences easily. You have more acceptance of situations and people and things, gives more acceptance. Of hard Venus makes people and situations more intolerable. Person is more intolerant when they have a difficult Venus. Reciprocity and refinement, one feels valued the right way because one is valuing others the right way, and one is not trying to conform one's unconscious biases. One has worked through some deeper unconscious conflict within their psyche. Both Rahu Venus and Ketu Venus are quite intense that way. So the process of growth, like all Rahu conjunctions, Rahu Shukra unfolds as a developmental process, a movement from infatuation to discernment, from intoxication of desire to the refinement of devotion. The journey is rarely moral in tone. It's not about doing the right thing. It is a rhythmic, cyclical, and often painful. As pleasure is involved, itself becomes a teacher. Pleasure itself becomes a teacher for the psyche. Sorry, that's where you get the feedback from. So the early stage of growth, the first stage is seduction of brightness, of beauty, of things that are glowing, radiating, shiny object syndromes. Like, whoa, I want that. Why can't I have that? In the beginning, Rahu amplifies Shukra's brilliance. Life becomes charged with allure, beauty, romance, sensuality, artistic refinement, dominates your awareness. Depends on which dasha you're in. If you're in Rahu Venus, have a conjunction and you don't have the dashas involved, the time period, so it becomes a bit irrelevant. So just because you have a Rahu Venus doesn't mean this happen all the time. So, but Shukra's maturation age is 24 to 25. So someone with a Rahu Shukra conjunction will have a significant moment at the age of 24, 25, which requires analysis and a dialogue. The person feels to be discerned. The person feels magnetized by love, art, comfort, convinced that through pleasure, wholeness will be found. That's what life is about. Venusian symbols, relationships, wealth, appearance, talent, shimmer with promise. It's very shimmery. Yet every attainment reveals itself as fleeting, dissatisfying. Satisfaction fades faster than I expected, leaving a residue of restlessness. At this stage, fulfillment is still external. The psyche believes happiness, it's not turned into any kind of bhakti and stuff. It's still about eros. The psyche believes happiness will arrive from the next encounter, the next adornment, the next relationship, the next moment of recognition. The Rahu Shukra intoxication lies precisely here, the endless anticipation of enough, unsatisfied. Middle phases, crises of value. So repetition gives rise to fatigue. Now, as the person starts to tire, become more tired. Age is dawning. Persons enter their 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, early 40s, probably. 42 is the maturation age of Rahu. 42 is an important age for someone to realize something about the Venus Rahu. Relationships or pleasures once idealized begin to feel hollow or demanding. The individual encounters the exhaustion of overstimulation, a weariness that is not physical but more existential. It starts to get tired with those things. The mirror of Venus, once reflecting beauty, now reflects confusion, distortion. The person begins to question the authenticity of love and the meaning of worth. If pleasure fades, what truly fulfills? So the hedonism starts to fail as a philosophy. This is the Venusian turning point. The bright one, Shukra, reveals the second face, not the seductress, but the teacher of proportion, balance. Through loss, heartbreak, disenchantment, it needs to get disenchanted actually. Rahu really enchants. The individual learns that value cannot be consumed, it must be cultivated. To become valuable, that's Venus's lesson. To become resourceful for others and serve others, connect with others, create mutually beneficial association through your resourcefulness, and then devoting yourself to that sort of process. It's a very Venusian way of doing things. Later phase, the maturity of fulfillment. Through reflection and restraint, the psyche rediscovers Venus in the higher octave, the devotional, replenishing, luminous Shukra. Desire remains, but its rhythm has slowed down. Appreciation replaces pursuit. The individual becomes capable of savoring rather than seizing, rather than grasping and holding on to pleasure, of loving without ownership, of having a nice car, but being like, even if it's not there, it's fine. It's not about the car. It's about the my capacity to find satisfaction in things. And this car happens to be one. It could just be a walk in the park. Fulfillment now arises through reciprocity and artistry, through giving beauty, not chasing it like a mad dog, through maintaining harmony rather than consuming it. A relationship becomes an offering, not transactions only. It's an offering, and you have more than enough, so you don't feel like you're being starved or being misvalued. Venus, in its higher capacities, is still transactional. Venus is fundamentally a transactional graha, but it's not, it doesn't make it about that. If you meet a good Venus, it is about a good deal, right? And a deal is a transaction, but it's not transactional. It still has its grace and it makes it enjoyable. So pleasure becomes refinement, the delicate art of balance between form and feeling. Ultimately, Rahu Shukra leads towards refined intimacy, the realization and intimacy of devotion to higher principles can also be there if the person has that kind of outlook. If not, it becomes still stays worldly and people centric, world centric. which is okay, which is good actually. The realization that fulfillment lies in resonance and not in conquest of some grand elusive uh, conquest, that something beautiful has we found in this new culture, this new person, new thing. The bright one regains the natural radiance, beauty as form of devotion, enjoyment as a form of grace. So using her here, but usually I don't like her and his for grahas. For Venus, it's natural. It comes naturally as like, okay, women and Venus are connected, so we use her. But these are psycho-metaphysical principles. They're not his or her. They're it, more importantly. So yeah, I use his and her at times, but Venus is usually naturally it comes out for me as her, but it's not something. It's not part of my Jyotishic philosophy fully. So chart conditions that modify the conjunction. The expression of Rahu Shukra depends profoundly on context, that is, dignity, sign, and grahaic association. Shukra, being the graha of proportion, resonance in the value, and value, naturally adjusts to the company it keeps. When joined with Rahu, whose tendencies to distort and magnify, these surroundings, this surrounding influences the surrounding influences determine whether refinement becomes an intoxication or a mastery of some sort. So Shukra's friends are Saturn and Mercury. Saturn provides structure, discipline, and endurance to uh, Venus. Its association steadies the restless rhythm of Rahu and Shukra. Saturn gives restraint to this conjunction, transforming indulgence into craftsmanship, pleasure into responsibility. It gives a sense of responsibility and duty, gives restraint and seriousness with that thing. Saturn cools Rahu's fever and restores proportion, you can say. Mercury adds intelligence, adaptability, and a sense of humor. Mercury is also conditional. It really can exaggerate this conjunction also. It can make a person more skillful in finding their Rahu Venus things. The thing that a person is looking through their Rahu Venus, Mercury can add a lot of skill to that. It translates Venusian attraction into artistry, conversation, creative mediation. When Mercury is strong, Rahu's exaggeration can express through refinement, communication, or design rather than excess or instability. So Mercury can actually give intelligence of how to methodically deal with this conjunction. Shukra's enemies are the sun and moon, not by conflict, but by contrast of function. They're just different in function. The sun as sovereign attention insists on autonomy, where Shukra seeks union. The sun is more of an autonomous function. It wants a self governing principle of Atman. Shukra seeks union with the world, so it sort of uh, extends sun's ways outward, and devotion also, which sun seeks to establish its own kingdom, and it doesn't realize that sun's light is also the borrowed light of Atman's light, is also the borrowed light of Paramatman. A sun can become like a little bit too about itself, and that's why Venus sort of distorts sun, brings sun, cools sun down into like considering other people, but it can also distract sun from its vision. When Rahu Shukra coincide with the sun, self-image may eclipse relational balance. So the pursuit of beauty or love becomes self-referential, dominated by the need to be admired. The moon governing emotional attunement can blur Shukra's discernment. So, joined with Rahu and Shukra, emotional dependency and sentimentality may replace clarity and reciprocity, producing attachments that consume more than they replenish. So, I think Tom Cruise again has Venus, Rahu, Moon conjunction. This is interesting, right? So, if you study his ways, his relationships, and stuff like that, you see some patterns there with what we've been discussing. Mars and Jupiter are neutral towards Shukra, but neutrality rarely persists under conjunction. There's no neutrality when there's conjunction. So it would, if there's Mars, Venus, and Rahu, it's a completely different expression of Venus Rahu. And if it's Rahu, Venus, and Jupiter, again, it's a completely different expression. Mars is Mars energizes Venusian magnetism, heightening passion and drive. So in Rahu's company, this can yield creative vigor, expressive dynamism, or volatility and exhaustion when desire lacks reflection. So Mars, Rahu, Venus can be very energetic. Jupiter's amplification amplifies the ethical and aesthetic dimension of Shukra. Yet Rahu's influence may create tension between moral aspiration because now you also have Rahu, Jupiter, and Rahu Venus happening at the same time. So that can be very interesting. With even Mars Rahu and Mars Venus, very interesting. So in all such combinations, conjunctions alter the logic of exchange itself. With friendly grahas, Shukra learns rhythm proportion. With inimical grahas, Shukra must reconcile autonomy with intimacy, self-definition with reciprocity, and things like that. You can like sort of, there's a lot of interpretive work that can be done here. These are some starting points in this particular lecture, just introducing these ideas. So with neutrals, Shukra converts neutrality into cooperation, integrating desire with principle and patience. So Venus adds more grace to the situation. So the governor of Rahu's sign further shapes the conjunction. If the governor supports Shukra by nature or strength, it's good. Otherwise, it can create a lot of confusion. If weak and misaligned, the same amplification devolves into indulgence and instability. But each Rahu Shukra conjunction configuration, therefore, is a distinct dialogue between Rahu's hunger and Shukra. And Rahu and Ketu are always context dependent. They arise from Sun Moon conjunction in the context of Earth, which is the bhavas, bhu. Sun, Moon, and Earth, which is the 12 bhavas, is what Earth is. And it's their alignment and conjunction which gives Rahu and Ketu. So Rahu and Ketu are always chart specific. So Rahu Shukra conjunction, one chart will be they have an inherent flavor. With Rahu, Shukra will in and of itself has an interpretation, but it has to be contextualized within the chart. It can play out in many different ways. So the surrounding grahas determine whether this brightness dazzles the sense or refines the heart. And that analysis, Rahu Ketu analysis, becomes super important. It's a service that I offer also, but it's not for everyone. But when it is, if you do get into that, it really sort of Jyotish is sort of the perfect tool to understand Rahu Ketu placements in one's chart, especially if you have conjunctions in situations like that. So Rahu Shukra is a trial of fulfillment and satiation fundamentally. Each Rahu conjunction reveals how consciousness handles a specific field of experience. With the sun, it was attention. The moon, it was about resonance. With Mars, about activity. Mercury, about cognition. With Jupiter, about your understanding. With Shukra, Rahu magnifies the field of satiation. How we absorb, digest, and feel completed by what we meet in life. That's the key. If there's one key takeaway from this lecture is that particular sentence. So Shukra's dharma is not to seek, but to assimilate, to digest, and feel satisfied. It governs the movement by which experience becomes nourishment. In the healthy Venusian rhythms, one receives fully, rests in appreciation, and lets the experience settle into the system as contentment. The world remains bright because nothing needs to be taken by force. Everything is taken through this diplomacy, harmony, and a good deal is given. When it fails, then diplomacy fails, then war starts. And Mars is that taking planet. I'll take what I want from it. So Mars always pushes other people's boundaries. You have to push it back a little bit. So then Mars is like, okay, that's where they draw the line. But Mars will keep trying to push it. So when people do have certain kinds of Marses, they have to be nudged a certain way to find their sort of balance. Otherwise, they keep taking more and more and more and more. Venus does not do that. Soft Venus has soft power more in the geopolitical context. So it still can, but in a very gentle way that you wouldn't probably even mind that much. Eventually, you'd probably come to your senses and be like, oh, there's this profound soft power, this person is curating culture and take affecting all our population and curating culture within our psyche through all these things. But you wouldn't mind it that much. Venus is generally super gentle, Soumya. So Rahu unsettles this rhythm. Its shadows exaggerates the appetite to experience and interrupts digestion. What should be an act of absorption becomes an act of accumulation. Psyche moves quickly from one experience to the next. Relationship, beauty, comfort, recognition, all of these kinds of things, without letting any of them sink in. Fulfillment gives way to agitation, enjoyment gives way to restlessness. It's a very restless sort of Venus, and Venus needs to not be rest. Venus can get agitated. It's the Rajoguna, and it can create a lot of excitation and restlessness in a person, and creates a lot of confusion. So Rahu Venus, if Shukra needs to be stabilized in the psyche through meditative work. If someone has this conjunction, so this is the trial of Shukra under Rahu's influence. Can experience be digested, or does it remain undigested sensations? Whether touch, sight, taste, any hearing, or taste itself, sight, hearing, smell. That was the last one, yeah. So, can one rest in the brightness of what is, or must the brightness always be renewed by novelty? Rahu Shukra exaggerates the principle of enjoyment until imbalance becomes self evident. That's when the person's like, oh, now it's enough. But it's after a lot of distortion. The individual eventually sees that exhaustion is not caused by what is lacking, but by what has not been assimilated. Life's sweetness turns sour when consumed too quickly. Even beauty requires stillness to be perceived, which is a very profound idea. Through cycles of attraction, fatigue, and recovery, the Venusian faculty learns proportion again. Rahu's overextension forces Shukra to rediscover its rhythm, its naturalness. Venus is a very natural graha, likes natural, simple, nice things. The pauses between pleasures, the silences between words, the space within which appreciation ripens. When integration occurs, satiation becomes very graceful and gentle. The individual no longer seeks to expand experience, but to deepen it. So you go deeper into that with one connection, with one relationship, with whatever it is. Encounters, whether sensory, relational, or aesthetic, are allowed to complete themselves. What was once restless becomes more replenishing. You feel better having had that thing. In this integration, Shukra fulfills its true function to maintain tripti, santosha, the quiet completeness that follows a full breath. Santosha is more moon based, tripti is more Venusian. A resolved note, a shared understanding, uh, a fuller breath, or these kind of things. There's just imagery and some sort of like ways to understand it. Fulfillment is no longer dependent on what is obtained. It arises from how wholly can one dwell within what is given. The Rahu Shukra conjunction thus tests the capacity for contentment, the ability to remain bright without burning out, full without overflowing. When that capacity matures, experiences cease to agitate but begins to give us rest. Venus loves a good rest. It really likes to regenerate and restore into strength. And when it's functioning well, it can do that well. So the essential patterns are some of these patterns, which you can pause the video and read through them. These are sort of like the more condensed version of this. So you can go through these sort of notes here. And these are the lives under Rahu Shukra conjunction. Aishwarya Rai has it, Indian actress, very famous, very big, global icon. Taylor Swift, Michael Phelps, the swimmer, has it. And Venus you need a certain kind of Venus to be a swimmer. Venus is water element. Sam Harris has it. Stephen Colbert has it. Sigmund Freud has it. Isaac Asimov had it. John Grisham has it. Andre the Giant had it. Uh, Albert Gore, one of the vice presidents, had it, and my middle advocate, Jimmy Carter. Justin Trudeau has it. Rahu Venus. Now he's in a relationship with Katy Perry. This is interesting, right? So it's a very Rahu Venus thing to do, probably. So you can contemplate these, the lives of these individuals, just go through the essential patterns, uh, which we've already sort of covered. It's sort of like a quicker version for you, and see what resonates, what made sense about Rahu Venus conjunction, what does not make sense, what you have also uh, understood with your own observations and studies. Comment in chat, in the chat, comment, see what kind of uh, contemplations you want to share with everyone else. What didn't make sense, ask questions about it. Just have an open dialogue about things. And thank you so much for being here for this rather long lecture, as always. And you can scan this QR code and see if you want to put in your correct full name and last name and good, well functioning email and get access to the Rahu Ketu library of all the notes, lectures, and research and stuff. And it keeps developing and it's free. So it's a free resource for everyone to study Rahu and Ketu. So thank you so much. I'll see you in the next lecture.